My name is Charlotte Irving. I'm 36, and for 19 Christmases in a row, my mother forgot I existed. I'm standing on the front porch of my farmhouse in Vermont, a federal-style place built in the 1830s. White clapboard, windows that rattle when the wind picks up, and I'm watching two women get led to a sheriff's cruiser in handcuffs. January air so cold it burns, snow crunching under boots that aren't mine. One of the women is screaming my name. The other is crying too hard to speak. The screaming gone is my sister. The crying one is my mother, and the papers scattered across my kitchen floor. A quitclaim deed, a forged notary seal, my signature in someone else's handwriting. Those are theirs, too. Before I take you back to the beginning, please take a moment to like and subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Now let me take you back to a September afternoon in Connecticut, 20 years ago, the day I stopped expecting Christmas cards. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Glastonbury, Connecticut. My sister Shelby had the largest bedroom, the one with the bay window overlooking the garden and the oak tree my father planted before he left. I had the room next to the garage. Every night I fell asleep to the hum and thud of the dryer spinning through the wall close enough that I could feel the vibration in my pillow. My mother Diane had a way of introducing us that set the tone for everything. At church, at parent-teacher nights, at the grocery store checkout when she'd run into someone from her book club, it always went the same way. This is Shelby, my oldest, honor roll volleyball captain. Then she'd glance sideways. And this is Charlotte, no description, no brag, just my name and a period. I told myself it didn't matter. Shelby was 3 years older, louder, more comfortable in a room. I figured my turn would come. It didn't. The Christmas I was 16, I found a gift box under Shelby's bed while looking for a missing textbook. It was wrapped in gold paper with a tag that read Charlotte in my mother's handwriting. I opened it carefully. A cashmere scarf nicer than anything Diane had ever given me, but the receipt was still inside, dated 3 weeks earlier, and the original tag tucked beneath the tissue paper said Shelby. My mother had bought the scarf for Shelby. When she realized she hadn't gotten me anything, she peeled off the label and wrote my name on a new one. She didn't even throw away the receipt. I put the box back. I never mentioned it. And on Christmas morning, when Diane handed me the scarf with a smile and said, "I saw this and thought of you," I thanked her. Shelby got a laptop that year. My father had been gone since I was 9, left for a woman in Maryland, and never looked back. Diane told everyone he abandoned us, and that was true enough. But what she didn't mention was that he'd sent cards to both of us for 4 years before giving up. Shelby wrote back. I found out later that Diane had intercepted mine. That's the thing about my family. The cruelty was never loud. It smelled like fabric softener and looked like a wrapped gift with the wrong name inside. I left home at 17, not with a fight, with a duffel bag and a bus ticket to Hartford. Deanne didn't stop me. Shelby was away at college by then, and I think my mother saw my departure as one less plate to wash. The first Christmas on my own, I sent a card, handwritten. I'd spent 20 minutes picking it out at a CVS, one with a cardinal on the front because Diane used to point out cardinals in the backyard when I was little. I included my new address. No reply. The second Christmas, I called. Diane answered on the 5th ring, laughing at something in the background. A party, probably. "Oh, Charlotte, Merry Christmas. Listen, I'm a little busy. Can I call you back?" She didn't call back. The third Christmas, I mailed a gift, a ceramic ornament of a cardinal I'd painted myself at a craft fair. I got a text from Shelby 3 weeks later. Mom says, "Thanks for the bird thing, not from Diane, from Shelby." And she called it a bird thing. The 4th Christmas, I didn't send anything. Nobody noticed. After that, the pattern held. I stopped counting somewhere around Christmas number 7 or 8, not because the hurt faded, but because I ran out of ways to describe the same silence. Every December, I'd see photos on Facebook. Diane's living room lit up with candles. The tree she always overdecorated. Shelby's kids tearing open presents while everyone smile dance, uncles, cousins, the whole extended family packed into that house. I was never in those photos. I was never tagged. After a while, I was never mentioned. Diane told the relatives I'd chosen to be on my own and that she'd tried everything. She painted herself as the heartbroken mother of a runaway daughter. A few cousins reached out early on, but when I told them my side, they got quiet and changed the subject. It was easier to believe Diane's version simpler. The Christmas I was 23, I sat alone in a studio apartment in New Haven, listening to church bells through a drafty window. I counted 11 chimes, then fell asleep on the couch with the TV on. That was the last Christmas I counted. Some things don't break all at once. They thin out like fabric washed too many times until one day you hold them up and realize you can see right through. I graduated from Southern Connecticut State with a degree in accounting and a GPA I'd earned at 2:30 in the morning over instant noodles and library coffee. Nobody came to the ceremony. I walked across the stage, shook a hand, sat back down, and went to work the next day. My first real job was at a regional insurance company in Hartford, entry-level compliance auditor. The title sounds dry, and it is. I spent my days reading through financial disclosures, flagging inconsistencies, checking whether signatures matched authorization records. Most people would find it mind-numbing. I found it calming. There was a logic to it. Numbers either added up or they didn't. Documents were either genuine or they weren't. After growing up in a house where love was performance and cruelty wore a warm smile, a world built on verifiable facts felt like a cool drink of water. I got promoted twice in 4 years, not because I was brilliant, because I was careful. I caught things other auditors missed. A decimal shifted one column left. A notarization dated before the form was signed. A middle initial that didn't match across 2 pages. My supervisor, a woman named Patris, once said, "Charlotte, you read paperwork the way most people read thrillers." I lived small, a used Civic that ran fine if you didn't mind the heater taking 10 minutes, an apartment with good light, and a kitchen big enough for one. I cooked every night scrambled eggs at 6:00 a.m., pasta at 7 p.m., and I discovered something unexpected. I liked mornings. I liked the quiet. I liked the smell of butter melting in a cast iron pan when nobody was there to ruin the silence. My friend circle was tight. Maggie from work, redhead, loud laugh, invited me to her family's Christmas dinner, 3 years running. A neighbor named Tim who let me his drill and never asked for it back. A cat named Tuesday that came with the apartment and stayed. I started saving, not for anything specific, just because I could. 10% of every paycheck, then 15, then 20. By the time I was 33, I had more in the bank than I'd spent in my entire childhood. I also started browsing real estate listings, specifically in Vermont. I'd gone to summer camp near Stowe when I was 12, the last good summer before my father left. The mountains had stayed with me, the air, the quiet. I didn't know yet what I was looking for, but I knew what it felt like. I found the house on a Tuesday in October. It was listed as a historic federal-style farmhouse, circa 1831, in need of cosmetic restoration. The photos were terrible, underexposed, shot at odd angles, but I could see through them. White clapboard siding, a columned front porch, windows with original hand-blown glass that caught the light like water, 2 acres of land rolling toward a tree of sugar maples, already orange and red. $285,000 that was less than a 2-bedroom condo in Hartford. I drove up on a Saturday. The house sat at the end of a gravel road about a mile past a general store with a tin roof. When I stepped onto the porch, the floorboards creaked and the front door was swollen in the frame. I had to push hard to get it open. Inside, it smelled like old pine and beeswax, the kind of smell that comes from 190 years of wood smoke and candle wax soaking into plaster. The kitchen had a cast iron stove from the 1940s, still bolted to the wall. The staircase banister was worn smooth by hands. I'd never know. I walked through every room, touched every wall, and I knew in the quiet, certain way that sometimes replaces thinking. This was mine. The attorney who handled the closing was a man named Russell Page. Late 50s, gray at the temples, the kind of face that had spent decades keeping things out of court. His office was on Main Street, above a hardware store, and smelled like coffee and legal pads. He was thorough. Went through the deed history, the title search, the property tax records. When we got to the signature page, he asked without looking up, "Any other family members who should be on the title?" "No," I said, "just me." He paused, looked at me for a long moment, then nodded and wrote something on his yellow pad, a note I wouldn't understand the significance of until months later. I signed the deed on October 18th, drove back to the house that evening, sat on the kitchen floor with a sandwich from the general store, my back against the wall, listening to the house settle around me. The floorboards popped. A draft whispered through the window seams. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like being forgotten. It felt like being home. The mistake was a photograph. It was Thanksgiving, my first in the house. I'd cooked a small meal for myself. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a pie from the bakery in town. The kitchen window framed the last of the autumn light, and the table, a farmhouse table I'd found at an estate sale, looked warm and golden against the old plaster walls. I took a picture, posted it on Facebook with the caption, "First Thanksgiving in my own home, table for one, and that's enough." 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Diane, the first time she'd called in 14 months. "Charlotte, is that your house?" Her voice was higher than I remembered, the way it got when she was trying to sound casual about something she cared about very much. "Yes, you bought a house in Vermont. Why didn't you tell me?" I almost laughed. "You didn't call me on my birthday, Mom, or Christmas, or any day in the last 14 months. "Oh, honey, I've been meaning to." She pivoted fast. A skill she'd perfected over decades. "It looks beautiful. How many bedrooms is there?" "Land." Before I could answer, Shell buckled. 3 minutes after I hung up on Diane. "Charlotte. Oh my God, the house is gorgeous. Can I come visit?" Her voice had that specific pitch. I'd learned to recognize by the time I was 12 the one she used when she wanted something. It sounded like friendliness, but it was closer to calculation. "I'm still settling in," I said. Of course, but maybe after the holidays. I'd love to see it in person. How big is the property?" I said something polite. I can't remember what. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, watching the late afternoon light stretch across the floor. My mother hadn't called me in 14 months. It took one photo of a house to remind her she had a second daughter. I deleted the Facebook post 30 minutes later, but the internet has a long memory, and my family has a longer one. By then, Shelby had already screenshot the photo, zoomed in on the porch columns, and as I'd learned later, started looking up the property records on the county assessor's website. The sun was going down. My shadow stretched long across the kitchen floor, bending at the wall like it was trying to leave the room. Shelby showed up 2 weeks before Christmas. No warning, no invitation. I was hauling firewood from the side of the house when a silver SUV with Connecticut plates pulled up the gravel drive. She stepped out in a puffer jacket and boots that had never touched actual dirt, carrying a gift bag and a smile I didn't trust. Surprise! I wanted to see the place before the holidays. She hugged me the way you hug someone you are about to ask a favor from. One arm, quick release. Then she walked inside before I could say anything. For the next 2 hours, Shelby toured every room. She opened closets. She counted windows. She photographed the kitchen, the staircase, the basement door, the back porch, and when she thought I wasn't looking, the deadbolt on the front entrance. "Who's on the deed?" she asked, casual as weather. "Me, just you, just me. Do you have a mortgage or did you buy it outright?" I set down my coffee mug. "Why are you asking?" She laughed. "I'm your sister, Charlotte. I'm just interested." I noticed she was typing into her phone between rooms. Quick little notes, thumbs moving fast. After she left, I stood on the porch and watched the SUV disappear down the road. The air smelled like pine and exhaust. 20 minutes later, my neighbor Frank Dorsey walked over. Frank was 71, a retired Marine who'd lived in the cottage next door for 30 years. He kept to himself mostly, but he'd helped me patch a gutter the week I moved in, and we'd fallen into the habit of checking on each other. "That your sister?" he asked. "Yeah." "She asked me if you travel for work, whether you're home most nights." I looked at him. "What did you tell her?" I said. "I didn't know." Which is true. He paused. "She also asked for the name of a locksmith." Something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with the December air. "Frank, if you see a car with Connecticut plates around here when I'm not home, would you let me know?" He didn't ask why. He just nodded. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a business card. "Not a locksmith's, a security company. Might want to think about cameras," he said, and walked home through the snow. I left for a work trip the first week of January. 3 days in Boston for an audit review. When I came back, the house looked the same. The porch light was on its timer. The wood pile hadn't moved. But the snow told a different story. 2 sets of footprints circled the house. One pair was large, a heavy boot, maybe size 11 with a work tread pattern. The other was smaller, a woman's boot with a pointed toe. Both led from the driveway around the east side of the house, past the basement windows to the back door. The back door lock had fresh scratches around the keyhole, bright, clean marks in the brass, the kind that come from a tool, not a key. They hadn't gotten in, but they'd tried. I crouched in the snow and photographed everything. The footprints, the scratches, the tire tracks in the gravel that didn't match my car. Then I called Frank. 2 nights ago, he said, Connecticut plates, silver SUV parked by the train around 9. I saw 2 people walk toward your house with a flashlight. They were there maybe 20 minutes, then left. I called Russell Page next. He picked up on the second ring. "I'm not surprised," he said, and the calmness in his voice told me he'd been waiting for this call. "When you first bought the place and I asked if anyone else should be on the deed, your face told me more than your answer did. What do I do?" First, install cameras. 4 corners, motion-activated, cloud storage. Second, don't confront them. If they come back, I need footage, not a conversation. Third, let me talk to the county sheriff. I'll file a preliminary report so there's a paper trail. I drove into town that afternoon and bought a 4-camera security system from the hardware store below Russell's office. Frank helped me install them. He had a drill and a ladder and the kind of patience that comes from 30 years of military service. By sundown, every entrance was covered. I stood in the kitchen, pulled up the app on my phone, and watched the 4 feeds glow green. The scratches on the lock caught the porch light, shining like something new and unwelcome. I ran my thumb across them and felt the ridges, sharp, clean, deliberate. Someone had tried to open my home, and I was fairly certain I knew exactly who. I did what I do best. I audited my own family. It took 3 evenings and a county records database. Shelby had worked as an administrative assistant at a real estate brokerage in New Haven, a place called Horizon Partners. I'd known that much. What I hadn't known was that Horizon Partners had been fined $42,000 by the state 4 years ago for filing irregularities, improper deed transfers, forged notarizations, missing disclosure forms. Shelby had been let go during the investigation, no charges filed against her personally. She was low enough on the ladder to avoid that, but she'd sat at the desk where those documents were processed. She'd seen how the system worked, how a quitclaim deed could be filed at a county recorder's office with almost no identity verification, how a forged signature paired with a convincing notary stamp could transfer ownership of a property without the real owner ever knowing. She knew enough to be dangerous, just not enough to be careful. I kept digging. Diane's financial picture was worse than I'd imagined. She'd refinanced the Connecticut house twice in 3 years, first to pay off credit card debt, then to float Shelby after her divorce. The mortgage balance was now $120,000 on a house worth maybe $160,000. Shelby's own debts added another $47,000 in credit cards alone. The math was simple. Between the 2 of them, they owed more than they owned. And I had just bought a property worth nearly $300,000 free and clear. No mortgage, no liens, just my name on a deed in a county recorder's office in Vermont. I sat in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, laptop casting a blue glow across the table, and felt the pieces click into place like tumblers in a lock. The phone calls, the questions, the visit, the scratches on the back door. My mother and sister weren't reconnecting with me. They were appraising me. Outside, snow fell in silence, covering the footprints that hadn't been mine. The house creaked once, that old wood sound that means settling or holding on. I closed the laptop and pressed my hands flat on Thedible. I'd spent 15 years catching fraud in insurance files. Now I was watching it walk toward my front door, wearing my sister's perfume. The call came on a Wednesday, mid-January. Charlotte. Deanne's voice was soft, trembling at the edges like a prayer. I know I haven't been a good mother to you. I know that, and I want to make it right. I held the phone and stirred my coffee. 1 rotation, 2, 3. I was thinking, she continued, maybe I could come stay with you for a few weeks, just us. I'm getting older, Charlotte. I want to be close to you. You've never visited me, Mom, not once in 19 years. I know, and I'm sorry. That's why I'm calling. I could hear her breathing, and underneath it something else. A faint rustle, a second breath. Shelby was listening. Deanne had the phone on speaker. I need to think about it, I said. The softness evaporated. It happened in under a second. The shift from pleading mother to something harder, colder, more familiar. You always do this, Charlotte. You hold people at a distance and then wonder why you're alone. I'm not alone, Mom. I'm just not available. You're selfish. You've always been selfish. I took a sip of coffee. It was still too hot. Is Shelby listening? Silence, then a click. The speaker phone turning off or Shelby hanging up on her end. Deanne recovered fast. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a mother who wants to see her daughter. Then come see me, Mom, but call first and come alone. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone on the counter and watched the steam rise from my mug. The kitchen was warm. The wood stove was doing its job. Outside, the sky was the flat gray of a Vermont January, the kind of gray that looks like it could last forever. She'd called me selfish. That used to land like a punch. It did when I was 16, when I was 20, even when I was 25. But somewhere between then and now, the word had lost its teeth, because I'd learned something about my mother. She onlooked me selfish when I refused to give her something she wanted. The word wasn't a description. It was a crowbar. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and set it on the drying rack. Then I pulled up the camera app. All 4 feeds green, still waiting, just like me. Frank's kitchen smelled like chicken soup and dried thyme. The kind of smell that fills a small room the way warmth fills a blanket. Slowly, completely, I'd brought the soup. He'd contributed the company. We sat at his kitchen table, a scratched maple thing that had been there since before his wife passed. And I told him everything, the phone calls, the footprints, the scratches on the lock, what I'd found about Shelby's work history and Diane's debts. He listened the way he did everything, quietly with his hands folded, not interrupting. When I finished, he didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That's terrible." He said, "My son stopped talking to me 12 years ago." I hadn't known that. Frank never talked about family. He wanted me to cost in a business loan, car wash franchise. I said no, the numbers didn't add up. And he was already carrying debt. He told me I was killing his dream. Frank took a slow sip of soup. Haven't heard from him since. Do you regret saying no? Every day I know I was right. Those 2 things don't cancel each other out. The steam from his bowl fogged the window beside him. Outside, the snow had started again. Soft flakes, almost hesitant like thee, weren't sure they wanted to land. Your mother and sister, Frank said carefully. They're not coming back because they miss you. They're coming back because you have something they want. I know, and you're not going to let them have it. No. He nodded. Then he reached into his jacket hanging by the door and pulled out a spare key, his spare key to his own house. He set it on the table between us. If things go sideways, you come here day or night. I'll leave the porch light on. I pick it up, the key. It was warm from being in his jacket, such a small thing, a piece of cut metal that weighed almost nothing. But it was the first key anyone had ever given me. Not to a rental, not to an office, a key to someone's home. Offered freely because they wanted me to feel safe. Thank you, Frank. You're the best neighbor I've had in 30 years, he said. Don't make me find another one. I almost cried. Almost. Instead, I refilled his bowl and said, same to you. The soup was good. The silence wasped her. The notification came at 2:14 on a Thursday afternoon while I was at my desk reviewing a claim file. Motion detected. Front camera. I opened the app under my desk, keeping my face neutral, a skill I'd perfected during 17 years of corporate meetings. The footage was crisp. Shelby's silver SUV parked by the train. Shelby stepping out wearing the same puffer jacket from her December visit. Behind her, a man I didn't recognize. Stocky, mid-40s, carrying a canvas tool bag over one shoulder. They walked around the house the way contractors walk around a job site. Purposeful assessing. Shelby pointed at the front door, the windows, the roof line. The man crouched by the back entrance and examined the lock, tilting his head the way a mechanic looks at an engine. Shelby held a manila folder. She opened it, showed the man something inside, pointed at the house again. He nodded. I zoomed in on the folder. The image was pixelated, but I could make out a logo in the corner, something official looking, printed on letterhead, and beneath it, what appeared to be a deed form. Then the man reached into his tool bag and pulled out a lockpick set. He held it up to the deadbolt, turned it in his fingers like he was measuring, then slid it back into the bag and wrote something on a notepad. They were rehearsing. I left my desk, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and called Russell. I have them on camera, I said. Shelby and a man with tools. They're at the house right now. Is the man trying to enter? Not yet. He's measuring the lock. She's showing him paperwork. Russell's voice was steady. Save the footage every second. Cloud backup. Don't delete anything. Don't confront anyone. I'll contact the sheriff's department today and update the file. Russell, the folder she was carrying, it looked like a deed form. A pause. Then if that folder contains what I think it contains, they'll come back and next time they won't be measuring. I watched the screen. Shelby was walking back to the car. She stopped, turned, and took one last photo of the front door. The man followed, tool bag over his shoulder. My sister measured my deadbolt with her thumb and forefinger, the way you'd size up a ring at a jewelry counter. I saved the video twice. Russell spread 3 documents across his desk. A sample quit-claim deed, a notarization form, and a printout of Vermont's property transfer statutes. His office smelled like coffee grounds and old paper. Here's what I think is happening, he said, tapping the quit-claim deed. This is the simplest way to transfer property ownership. You fill in the names, sign it, get it notarized, and file it at the county recorder's office. The whole thing takes 20 minutes and the recorder doesn't verify identity. Not in most counties. They check that the form is filled out correctly and the fees are paid. They don't call the grantor to confirm. They don't compare signatures to anything on file. The system was built for speed, not security. I stared at the form. It was absurdly simple. Half a page of fields, a signature line, a notary block. So Shelby could forge my signature, stamp a fake notary seal, walk into the county office and file this. And on paper, I'd no longer own my house. For a while, yes, until you discovered it and challenged it in court, which could take months. In the meantime, they could take out a loan against the property, try to sell it, or simply move in and claim occupancy. I thought about the scratches on my back door, the man with the tool bag, the folder in Shell's hands. They're not just going to file paperwork, I said. They're going to break in, create evidence that they've been living there, make it look like a family arrangement. Russell leaned back in his chair and for the first time since I'd known him, smiled. It was a thin smile, more recognition than warmth. That's exactly what I think, which is why we're going to let them try. He drew a timeline on his legal pad. A horizontal line with marks at key points. Camera footage, sheriff's report, my deed, their forged deed. Every line pointed toward the same event. The next time I appeared to leave town, when they enter the house, that's burglary. When they present forged documents, that's fraud. If they try to file those documents, it's a felony. But we need them inside on camera with the papers in hand. He looked up. Can you do that? Let them in knowing who they are. I've been letting them in my whole life, I said. This time I'll be watching. Russell's pen scratched across the legal pad, steady, deliberate, like a clock that had finally started counting down. I spent a Saturday waxing the floors. It wasn't necessary, not practically. The old pine boards had survived nearly 2 centuries without my help, but there's something about running a cloth across wood grain, feeling the wax warm under friction that resets something inside you, like you're polishing the house and yourself at the same time. I did the kitchen first, then the front hall, the living room, the bedroom at the top of the stairs. Every room I'd chosen, every wall I'd touched when I first walked through the door in October, and knew the way you sometimes just know that this was where I was supposed to be. The beeswax smelled like honey in old churches. The winter sun came through the wavy glass windows and threw tiny rainbows on the plaster walls, a trick of the old hand-blown panes bending light in ways modern glass never does. I fixed the kitchen cabinet hinge that had been squeaking since November, hung new curtains, linen cream colored from a shop in town, cooked rice on the cast iron stove, and ate standing at the counter looking out at the snow-covered field. And I remembered I was 6 Christmas morning. Diane was in the kitchen, and for once it was just the two of us. Shelby was at a sleepover. We made sugar cookies. Diane showed me how to press the dough flat with my palm, how to cut shapes with a glass rim because we didn't have cookie cutters. She let me eat the scraps raw, something I didn't know the name of. That was the last Christmas I remember her looking at me, actually looking, not past me or through me. 6 years old, flour on my fingers, humming along to a song I couldn't name. I said it out loud to the empty kitchen. I won't let anyone take this from me. The house didn't answer. It just stood there old and patient and let me belong. Late in the afternoon, Frank knocked. He had a box of maple candy from the general store. "Welcome to your first real winter," he said. I invited him in. We sat by the wood stove and ate candy and didn't talk about sisters or locks or footprints in the snow. We talked about the weather and the town's plan to fix the bridge on Route 4 and whether the general store would start carrying better coffee. Small things, good things, the kind of things that make a life when no one's watching. I need to pause here for a moment. If you've ever had someone in your family make you feel like you didn't belong in your own home, you know what that silence sounds like. If this story is hitting close, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And leave a comment. Have you ever had to protect something you built from the people who were supposed to protect you? Now, let me tell you what happened when I pretended to leave. The call came the following Tuesday. Shelby friendly. Too friendly. "Hey, Charlotte, I know it's late, but I was thinking I never brought you a Christmas gift. I feel terribly about it." "Shelby, you haven't given me a Christmas gift since I was 15, she laughed. The kind of laugh that covers a flinch. I know, I'm trying to be better. "Are you going to be home this weekend?" "I thought I'd drive up. I might be traveling for work." "Oh, where to?" "Boston, audit review." "When do you leave?" I could almost hear her leaning forward. "Friday morning. Back Monday." "That's perfect. I'll come another time then. No rush." I hung up. 30 seconds later, Diane called, same questions, different wrapping. "Charlotte, sweetheart, are you home this weekend?" "I was thinking of making the drive." "I'll be in Boston, Mom." "Oh, well, when do you leave?" "Friday." "And you'll be gone through the weekend?" "Yes." "Okay. Be safe, honey." She called me honey twice in one conversation. Diane hadn't used that word with me since the sugar cookies. I set my phone on the counter and looked at the camera feeds. All 4 squares, green and still. The house was quiet. The snow outside was pristine. No footprints, no dirt tracks, nothing. Not yet. I called Russell. They're coordinating. Shelby asked my schedule. Diane followed up 30 seconds later. "Good, I've already spoken with the sheriff's office. When the cameras trigger, call 911 first, then me. I'll meet you there. I won't be at the house, I know. You'll be at Frank's." Close enough to see, far enough to be safe. I packed a bag that night. Laptop, phone, charger, the folder of documents Russell had prepared, my deed, the camera footage, timestamps, the sheriff's preliminary report, everything clean, everything organized, the way I'd organize an audit file. The wind picked up after dark, howling through the old chimney like it was trying to tell me something. I sat in the kitchen by the wood stove, the only light coming from the embers behind the grate, and listened. My sister wished me Merry Christmas, 3 weeks late. That was generous. She'd been forgetting for 19 years. I checked the cameras one last time. 4 green squares. The porch light made the snow glow amber. I was ready. Friday morning, I made a performance of leaving. I loaded my car in the driveway where it could be seen from the road. Suitcase, laptop bag, a cooler like I was going to be gone for days. I backed out slow, drove past the tree line, and headed toward town. I parked at the grocery store lot beside the gas station. Frank was already there, waiting in his truck. A faded blue Ford with rust along the wheel wells and a bumper sticker that said, "Veterans for Vermont." "Nice acting," he said as I climbed in. 15 years of corporate poker faces, finally useful. He drove me back to his place using the side road that looped behind the ridge. From his kitchen window, I could see the front of my house, a white rectangle against the tree line, porch light off, no smoke from the chimney. It looked empty. That was the point. I sat up at Frank's kitchen table, laptop open, camera app running, phone charged, and face up. Russell had texted. Sheriff briefed. Deputies on standby. Dispatch knows the address. Frank made tea. Earl Grey, he had bought a box specifically for this, he admitted, because the regular stuff tastes like cardboard. We sat and waited. The afternoon passed slow. No motion alerts, no cars on the road. The sky went from white to gray to a deeper gray that meant more snow. Frank read a book about the Battle of Chosin Reservoir. I reviewed the footage from the last 2 weeks, frame by frame, making sure the timestamps were clean and continuous. At 4, Frank heated leftover stew. We ate at his table, not talking much. The radio played country music low, someone singing about a highway and a woman and a truck, the kind of song that fills silence without demanding attention. At 6, the sky was fully dark. The temperature dropped to 11 degrees. My house sat in the distance, dark and quiet, looking exactly like what Shelby wanted it to look like, abandoned for the weekend. I thought about what I was doing. I was setting a trap for my own mother and sister. The words sounded wrong no matter how I arranged them. But then I thought about the footprints, the scratches, the forged folder, and the 19 Christmases I'd spent alone. And the words rearranged themselves into something simpler. I was locking my door and waiting to see who tried to break it down. Frank turned off the radio at 8. "Get some rest," he said. "Could be a long night." He was right. 9:00, nothing on the cameras. The house sat dark and frozen. Snow piled on the porch rail, not a shadow moving. I started to doubt. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Shelby's questions were just questions. Maybe Diane's sudden sweetness was genuine. A 62-year-old woman finally regretting the daughter she'd lost. Maybe the footprints were hikers. The scratches were raccoons. The man with the tool bag was a contractor Shelby hired to give me a quote on new locks as a surprise gift. Maybe I was the crazy one. I pulled up the footage again. Shelby's face lit by her own flashlight grinning at my front door. The quitclaim folder in her hands. The way the man had measured my deadbolt like it was a problem to be solved. No, I wasn't wrong. I just wished I were. I thought about my mother. Not the Diane who'd stopped calling. Not the one who'd tried to convince me to let her stay a few weeks. The other one, the 6-year-old me Diane, the one who'd hummed in the kitchen and showed me how to cut cookies with a glass. She'd held me once after I fell off my bicycle. I was 11, scraped knee crying on the sidewalk. She'd knelt down and pulled me close. I counted 4 seconds. I counted because I wanted to remember how long it lasted. Even then, I knew it wouldn't last. 4 seconds. That was the entire inventory of tenderness I had from my mother. If they came tonight, if the sheriff's deputies put her in handcuffs, she could go to jail. My mother, the woman who made sugar cookies with me once, 25 years ago, and never did it again. Frank looked up from his book. He must have seen something in my face because he set it down and said slowly, "You're not trapping your mother, Charlotte. You're locking your own front door and seeing who tries to pick it." I wiped my eyes. First time in this story I'd let that happen. I didn't want to be right about her, Frank. I know being right means I'm motherless for good. He was quiet for a long time. The clock on his wall ticked, an old wind-up clock with a brass pendulum, each tick landing like a small, precise decision. "You've been motherless for a while," he said. "This just makes it honest." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. The clock kept ticking. 11:47, my phone lit up on Frank's kitchen table. Motion detected. Front camera. I grabbed it with both hands. The screen showed a pickup truck, dark, maybe navy, pulling off the road and parking near the train. Same spot as before, engine off, headlights killed. A door opened. Shelby stepped out wearing dark clothes. No puffer jacket this time, just a heavy coat and gloves. Behind her, a man, Wade Bossert, though I didn't know his name yet. Tool bag over his shoulder. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd been told this was routine. Then the passenger door of the truck opened and Diane got out. She was wearing a winter coat and tennis shoes, not boots, not gear, just regular shoes like she was going to the grocery store. She stood by the truck for a moment, hugging herself against the cold, then followed Shelby toward the porch. Shelby brought her flashlight beam across the front of the house. Windows dark. No Karen the drive. She turned to Wade and nodded. He knelt in front of my door. His hands moved inside his bag. Something metallic caught the flashlight. A picket. I called 911. My voice was steady. My hands were not. This is Charlotte Irving. There are 3 people attempting to break into my home and I gave the address. I'm watching them on my security cameras. One of them has lockpicking tools. Units have been notified, ma'am. Estimated arrival 8 minutes. I called Russell. 2 rings. They're here, 3 of them. Shelby, my mother, and the locksmith. I'm leaving now. Don't approach the house. Frank was already at the window, binoculars raised. I can see the flashlight, he said. There at the front door. On my screen, Wade worked the deadbolt. His hands were practiced. Shelby stood behind him. Folder clutched to her chest, breath making small white clouds in the dark. Diane stood a few steps back, looking around nervously. Even through the camera's grainy feed, I could see her hands shaking. Something clicked on the audio feed. A small metallic sound. The door swung open. My sister's face filled the screen, lit from below by her own flashlight, mouth curving into a smile that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with what she thought she'd won. They went inside. The indoor cameras captured everything. Shelby entered first, flashlight sweeping the hallway. She moved with purpose straight to the kitchen where she set the manila folder on the table and opened it. Even in the low-resolution feed, I could see the documents, multiple pages, official-looking letterhead signature lines. Wade followed, closing the door behind him. He stood by the entrance, shifting his weight, looking around the way someone does when they're starting to realize they don't belong. Then Diane came in. She walked slowly as if the house might swallow her. Her eyes moved across the kitchen, the curtains I'd hung, the cast iron stove, the waxed floors. She walked across the floor I'd polished that Saturday. Each step made a sound, a tiny grinding like something being worn away. Shelby was already working. She spread the papers across the table. The forged quitclaim deed, a counterfeit notary certification, what appeared to be a fabricated deed of trust. She'd even brought a stamp, a round seal that she pressed into an ink pad and stamped onto the notary block. "Mom, stand here," Shelby said. "I need you to hold the deed next to the table. I'm going to take a photo." "Proof." Agreed to the transfer. "Why do we need proof?" Diane whispered. "Because if anyone asks, we show them the photo. Charlotte signed it. Charlotte was here. Charlotte wanted this." Diane held the paper with both hands. Her fingers trembled. Wade cleared his throat. "Wait, whose house is this exactly?" Shelby didn't look at him. "My sister's, I told you. She agreed to put it in the family name. The lock was just stuck." "Then why are we here at midnight?" "Because Charlotte's traveling and asked us to handle it while she's away." "Can you just wait?" "Just stand by the door, okay?" He didn't move toward the door. He stood where he was, arms crossed, and for the first time looked genuinely uncertain. On my screen, Shelby arranged the forged documents in a fan across the table and photographed them with her phone. Flash on. The papers lit up white. My forged signature. Someone's practiced imitation of my handwriting. Caught the light. I watched my mother hold a piece of paper that said I didn't own my own home. And I watched my sister smile at the camera like she was taking a family portrait. The siren started 4 minutes later. The sound came from a distance. A thin wail threading through the trees, barely audible at first, then growing. Shelby's head snapped toward the window. "What is that?" Through the camera, I watched her face change. The confidence drained out of it like water from a cracked glass. Blue and red lights appeared at the end of the gravel road, flickering through the bear maples. 2 sheriff's cruisers moving fast but not rushing. The controlled speed of people who know exactly where they're going. Diane grabbed Shelby's arm. "What did you do?" "Shelby, what did you shut up? Shut up and let me think." Wade backed toward the door. I'm out of this." He turned, reached for the handle, and froze. Through the glass pane, the headlights of the first cruiser swept across the porch. I stood up from Frank's table, put on my coat, walked out his front door into the January night. The cold hit me like a wall, 12 degrees, snow crunching under my boots, the sound sharp and clean in the silence between siren pulses. I walked across Frank's yard, through the gap in the stone wall, and onto the road that led to my house. The cruisers were parked now, lights still spinning. 2 deputies stood at the front porch, one with a flashlight, one with a hand on the radio. Russell's car pulled up behind me, a gray sedan with a cracked tail light. He got out carrying a leather folder and didn't say a word, just fell into step beside me. We stopped at the gate. I didn't go further, I didn't need to. The deputy knocked, 3 sharp raps. Sheriff's department opened the door. Silence inside, then shuffling, then Diane's voice high and panicked. Charlotte, she couldn't see me. I was standing 30 FT away in the dark at the edge of the light thrown by the cruiser's headlamps. The door opened. Shelby stood in the frame, manila folder still in her hand, flashlight still on. Behind her, Diane clutched the edge of the kitchen table. Wade had his hands raised, palms forward, like he'd been practicing this moment in his head for the last 90 seconds. Blue and red light swept across the white clapboard in slow, rhythmic pulses. It turned my house into something that finally looked the way my family had always made me feel, exposed. The deputies were methodical. They separated everyone. Shelby on the porch steps, Diane by the cruiser. Wade against the truck, 3 flashlights, 3 circles of light on the snow, 3 people who'd come to take my house and found the law waiting instead. I walked up to the first deputy and handed him the folder Russell had prepared, the original deed in my name, certified by the county recorder, the camera footage logs printed with timestamps, the preliminary report Russell had filed 2 weeks earlier. My name is Charlotte Irving. I own this property. These 3 individuals broke in tonight. I have security camera footage of the entire entry. The deputy looked at the folder, then at me, then at Shelby, who was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. The recognition that comes when someone realizes the person they've been underestimating just walked in holding all the cards. Russell arrived at my shoulder. He spoke to the deputy in that calm, precise way lawyers have when they're laying a foundation. The suspect accessed the property using lockpicking tools. She brought forged documents, a quick claim deed with a fraudulent signature, and a counterfeit notary seal. The documents are currently on the kitchen table. The deputy went inside, came back holding the manila folder with gloved hands. WD spoke first, both hands still raised. I didn't know. She told me it was a family house, said the lock was jammed. I'm a locksmith. I was just doing a job. Shelby turned on him. Shut up, Wade. Diane looked at me. Her face was wet. Tears or the cold, I couldn't tell. Charlotte, you called the police. Ani, your own mother. I looked at her for a long time. The blue and red lights turned her face into something shifting and strange, cycling between colors like the truth she'd never been able to settle on. You broke into my house, Mom. You forged my signature. You came at midnight because you thought I was gone. This isn't a family matter. This is a crime. The deputy found the forged notary seal in Shelby's coat pocket. It was a rubber stamp, the kind you can order online for $30, with a fabricated notary number that didn't exist in any state registry. Shelby had prepared more carefully than I'd expected, but not carefully enough. My mother asked how I could do this. I asked her how she could forge my name and not see the irony. The deputy read the charges while the snow fell around them like the world's quietest audience. Shelby, burglary in the 2nd degree, forgery, attempted fraud. Diane, conspiracy to commit burglary, criminal trespass, both felonies under Vermont law. When handcuffs went on Shelby's wrists, she screamed. Not words, just a sound, sharp and ragged. The sound of someone whose plan has collapsed so completely that language can't cover it. Then the words came. Charlotte, don't do this. We're sisters. We're family. I stood on the path 15 ft from the porch and didn't move. Diane was quieter. She went almost limp when the deputy took her arm. She looked at me the way she looked at the house when she first walked in, like she was trying to figure out how something this solid had gotten here without her permission. I'm sorry, she said. Charlotte, I'm sorry. I just wanted to be close to you. You wanted to be close to the house, Mom, not to me. She opened her mouth, closed it. The deputy guided her toward the cruiser, one hand on her elbow, gentle enough that it almost looked like kindness. Wade was taken to a separate vehicle. He went without resistance, shaking his head slowly like a man replaying the last hour and finding every wrong turn. The handcuffs made a sound I'll never forget. Small and final, like a door clicking shut on 20 years of waiting. Russell stood beside me as the cruisers pulled away. The blue and red lights shrank down the gravel road, flickered through the trees, and disappeared. The night settled back into silence. That particular Vermont silence that sounds like the whole world is holding its breath. Are you all right? Russell asked. I watched the last of the taillight glow fade behind the ridge. I don't know, I said. Ask me in the morning. He nodded. The documents on the table are evidence. Don't touch them. I'll coordinate with the sheriff's office for collection tomorrow. He shook my hand, brief, firm, got in his car and drove away. I stood alone in my front yard. The snow was still falling. The porch light was off. I turned it off on purpose to make the house look empty. I switched it on now. The warm glow spread across the porch, the steps, the footprints in the snow that weren't mine. I went inside and locked the door, both locks, the one the locksmith had picked and the deadbolt I'd installed myself. The kitchen looked like a crime scene because it was. Shelby's folder lay open on the table. The farmhouse table I'd found at an estate sale, the one I'd eaten my first Thanksgiving dinner on, the forged documents fanned across its surface. The quitclaim deed, the notary certification, a fabricated deed of trust. I didn't touch them. Russell had said not to, but I read them standing up, hands in my coat pockets using the overhead light. The quitclaim deed listed me as the grantor and Diane as the grantee. My signature was forged, a practiced imitation, close enough to fool a clerk, but not close enough to fool me. The downstroke on the C was too heavy. The loop on the G in Irving went the wrong direction. Whoever had practiced it had used a copy of my signature, not the original. The notary number, I checked it on my phone while standing there, didn't match any active notary in Connecticut, Vermont, or any adjacent state. The notary name, Susan Ellerby, returned 0 results in the national database. Shelby had invented a person to certify a lie. The deed of trust referenced a mortgage that didn't exist on a property I owned outright. The dates were wrong. The transfer was backdated to November, 2 weeks before I'd even closed on the house. I would have caught every one of these errors in my first week as an auditor. My sister had built a forgery the way she'd built everything in her life, with just enough effort to fool someone who wasn't paying attention, and not enough to survive someone who was. Russell arrived the next morning with a deputy to collect the evidence. They photographed the table, the papers, the ink pad, and stamp they found in Shelby's coat pocket, which the deputy had bagged the night before. This is enough for felony charges, Russell said. Forgery alone carries up to 10 years in Vermont. The burglary adds more. I nodded. He looked at me carefully. You don't have to enjoy this, Charlotte. I don't enjoy it. Good. That's the difference between justice and revenge. I looked at the papers one last time, my name in someone else's hand on a document that said I'd given away the only home I'd ever had. I'd spent 15 years spotting fraud in insurance files. Spotting it in my own family's handwriting was easier than I'd expected and harder than I can explain. The news moved through my family the way fire moves through dry grass, fast, hot, and in every direction at once. Diane and Shelby were released on bail the next morning. Shelby posted hers with money she borrowed from her ex-husband's mother. Diane's was covered by the equity left in the Connecticut house, which, given her mortgage situation, wasn't much. The call from Aunt Margaret came 2 days later. Margaret was Diane's younger sister, 60, quiet, lived in a Cape Cod-style house in coastal Rhode Island. She'd always been the family member I understood least because she never took sides, never gossiped, and never visited at Christmas. "Charlotte," she said, and her voice was steady in a way that told me she'd been preparing for this conversation. "Your mother called me. She says you had her arrested. She broke into my house with forged documents and a locksmith. I called the police. The rest was their decision." A long pause. Then Margaret said something that changed everything. "Diane did the same thing to our mother." I sat down. "What? Before your grandmother passed in 2018, she had a small savings account, 22,000. Diane got power of attorney during Mom's last hospital stay. She emptied the account 3 days before Mom died, transferred it to her own checking account. I found out at the estate settlement. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it was my place. And your mother told everyone I was lying." She paused again, "But I kept the bank statements. I've had them in a drawer for 8 years. I pressed my hand flat on the kitchen table, the same table where Shelby's forged papers had been spread 12 hours earlier. Margaret, did Grandma know? She knew something was wrong. She told me the week before she died that she wanted to leave you something. Charlotte's the only one who didn't ask, she said. But Diane handled the will and your name wasn't in it. The kitchen was bright with morning sun. January in Vermont, cold and clear, the kind of light that shows everything. I wasn't the first woman in this family Diane had tried to steal from. I was just the first one who didn't let her. "Thank you for telling me, Margaret, Charlotte." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Your grandmother would have been proud of you." I couldn't speak for a while after that, but the silence felt different this time. It wasn't empty. It was full of things finally being said. Diane called from a phone I didn't recognize, probably Shell's. It was late afternoon, 3 days after the arrest. The light was going orange outside my window. "Charlotte, you have to drop the charges. No preamble, no I'm sorry, straight to the demand, I'm your mother. I could go to jail. You broke into my house, I was confused. Shelby said you'd agreed. Mom, there are 4 cameras in my house. I watched you hold a forged deed while Shelby photographed it. You told her to take the picture. You said, and I quote, proof that Charlotte agreed to the transfer." Silence. A long humming silence like a phone line with no one on the other end. "I made a mistake." She whispered, "You made a crime." "Charlotte, please, I'm 62 years old. I can't go to prison. Y'all can't forge my signature either. But here we are." I heard her crying. The real kind. Not the kind she used at family gatherings when she wanted sympathy, but the wet, ugly, uncontrolled kind that comes when the performance breaks down and what's underneath is just fear. Part of me wanted to fold. The part that was still 6 years old, still making cookies, still counting the seconds of a hug. But I wasn't 6 anymore. "Mom, you don't know my favorite color. You don't remember my birthday without Facebook reminding you. You didn't invite me to Christmas for 19 years. You didn't call when I graduated, when I got promoted, when I bought my first car. But you called the day you saw my house. Love isn't the word you get to use with me." She was quiet. I could hear her breathing, ragged, shallow. "I'm not dropping the charges, but I'm also not going to sit in a courtroom and watch you be sentenced. I'm done, Mom. Not angry. Done, just done. You'll regret this, maybe, but I'll regret it in my own house with my own name on the deed and my doors locked. And that's more than you were going to leave me." I hung up. I set the phone face down on the counter, waited for guilt to arrive. It didn't. Outside, the sun dropped behind the ridge, and the sky went through every shade of orange I'd never had a name for. The kitchen cooled, the wood stove ticked. Maple, I'd brought her home from the shelter the week before, patted over and pressed her nose against my hand. I scratched her ears and watched the sky darken. Still here, still mine. Spring came the way it comes in Vermont. Late, reluctant, and all at once. One week the world was white and frozen. The next the snow pulled back from the fields like a blanket being folded, and underneath was mud and pale green. The first shoots of something alive after 5 months of quiet. I planted a garden in April. Nothing ambitious. Tomatoes, basil, snap peas, a row of marigolds along the fence to keep the deer honest. Frank helped me build a bean trellis out of birch branches he'd cut from his property line. "You know what you're doing?" he asked, watching me pack soil around a tomato seedling. "Not really." "Good. Gardens teach patience to people who think they already have it." Maple had settled into the house like she'd always lived there. She was a 9-year-old beagle mix with a gray muzzle and a habit of sleeping in the square of sunlight that moved across the living room floor throughout the day, following it from window to window like a slow, warm clock. Maggie drove up from Hartford for a weekend in May. We cooked together, something we'd never done because my old apartment kitchen was too small for 2 people. Here there was room. She made her grandmother's pasta sauce. I made bread. We opened wine at 3:00 in the afternoon and nobody cared. "This place suits you," Maggie said, leaning against the counter with her glass. "You're calmer here." "I'm not calmer, I'm just finally somewhere that doesn't make me tense." She thought about that. Same thing, I think. In June, I got an email from Margaret. She'd been going through old photos and found one of my grandmother as a young woman, early 30s, dark hair, standing in front of a house, a federal-style house with white clapboard siding and a column porch. I stared at the photo for a long time. The house wasn't mine. It was somewhere in Rhode Island, demolished decades ago, but the resemblance was uncanny. The same bones, the same proportions, the same way the light hit the front windows. I printed the photo and hung it in the kitchen next to the window where I drank my morning coffee. My grandmother had never seen my house, but something in the way she stood on that porch, shoulders back, chin up, smiling at the camera like she owned the ground beneath her feet, told me she would have understood why I fought for it. I planted tomatoes in April. It was the first time I'd ever put something in the ground and trusted it to grow. The court dates came and went without me. Russell handled everything. He'd offered to have me present for the hearings, but I told him no. I didn't need to watch my mother stand before a judge. I didn't need to see Shell's face when the charges were read. I'd seen enough of both of them to last a lifetime. Shelby took a plea deal in June. 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, a 5-year restraining order, and a felony forgery conviction that would follow her name on every background check for the rest of her life. Her ex-husband's attorney used the charges to renegotiate custody of their 2 kids. She lost weekday overnights. Diane pleaded no contest to conspiracy and trespass, 1 year of probation, 100 hours of community service, and a restraining order matching Shelby's. 5 years, no contact with me or my property. Wade cooperated with the investigation. He provided a written statement confirming that Shelby had told him the house was a family property with a stuck lock and that he hadn't known about the forged documents. The DA declined to prosecute. Russell called me with the results. On a Thursday afternoon, I was in the garden tying tomato vines to stakes, Maple asleep in the shade nearby. "It's over," he said. "Thank you, Russell. You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself a quiet summer." I hung up and sat in the garden for a while. The sun was warm on my shoulders. A cardinal landed on the bean trellis, red against green, bright as a signal. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized Shelby's handwriting. Their Al version, not the one she'd used to forge my signature. I opened it at the kitchen table. "Charlotte, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let my debt and my fear turn me into someone I don't recognize. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know." I read it twice, folded it, put it in the drawer where I keep the property deed, the camera footage logs, and the photo of my grandmother. I believed her. She was sorry. People usually are after they get caught, but I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need her explanation. I didn't need her name in my phone or her voice on my porch or her face at my table. I needed my garden and my dog and my house and my door locked from the inside by me. Following December, I set the table for 4. Frank brought a bottle of cider he'd been saving since autumn. Maggie drove up with a pie so large it barely fit through the door. Margaret came from Rhode Island with a casserole dish and a card that said, "From your grandmother's kitchen." Their sipe, not the dish. I cooked the chicken myself, roasted it with thyme and lemon. the way I'd taught myself from a cookbook I'd found at the general store, the same store where I'd bought my first sandwich the day I signed the deed. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and butter and something I couldn't name but recognized. The particular warmth that happens when a house is full of people who chose to be there. Maple stationed herself under the table, nose twitching at every passing plate. Frank raised his glass to the house that's still standing. I raised mine to the people who chose to stay. We ate. We talked. Margaret told stories about my grandmother, how she'd organized the church Christmas pageant every year, how she'd made her own wreaths from balsam fir and wire. Maggie described her sister's latest kitchen disaster in detail, so vivid Frank choked on his cider. Frank told a story about a moose that had wandered into his garage in 1992 and refused to leave for 3 days. Nobody mentioned Diane. Nobody mentioned Shelby, not because they were forbidden topics, but because they weren't relevant. Not tonight. After dinner, I stood at the kitchen window while the others settled into the living room. The snow was falling light and slow, the kind that sticks to everything it touches. The porch light made the flakes glow amber. A year ago, I'd stood in the same spot and watched my mother get led to a sheriff's cruiser. Tonight, I was watching snowfall on a house that was mine, listening to laughter through the doorway with a dog at my feet and a grandmother's photo on the wall. 19 Christmases, my mother forgot I existed. The 20th, she broke into my house to steal it. The 21st, I set the table for 4 and didn't save her a seat. Home was never about the people who shared your blood. It was about the ones who showed up when the table was set and meant it. That's where I'll leave it. If this story reminded you of someone you know or someone you used to be, share it with them and check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of your house. Take care of yourself.